Well, the majority of the farmers that are being murdered are white, and whites are a tiny minority within South Africa. So there's your first clue on why it's not normal. And then, secondly, I mean, if you substitute farmers with any other profession, suddenly it doesn't really sound like a metaphor at all anymore. Kill the journalist, kill the politician, kill the doctor, kill whatever. You can put any profession into that chant, and then it suddenly becomes very uncomfortable. And people are like, oh, I wouldn't want to be seen in public chanting that. But for some reason, kill the farmer, kill the Boer is acceptable.
I want to start by talking about the Oval Office yesterday. There was a meeting between President Trump and your president, the president of South Africa. Do you think that that president was surprised and shocked when Trump showed him those videos of people chanting "kill the Boer" and so on?
Well, he certainly tried his best to act shocked, but I mean, there's only really two options. Either he's completely oblivious to what's happening in his own country, or he's pretending to not know anything. I don't know what's worse.
Now, he was trying to defend the accusations against him that white South Africans are being persecuted in South Africa, particularly the farmers. And he actually brought out one of his ministers, the Minister for Agriculture, the Minister for Farming, who is a white South African from the opposition party. What did you make of this defense against these accusations? Was it convincing? Can you perhaps tackle some of the points that he was making?
Well, not convincing at all, seeing as I think calling someone who's employed by the South African government still the opposition, I think, is a bit of a stretch. I mean, yes, he's the former opposition, but he now occupies a very cushy position, a very well-paying ministerial position under President Ramaphosa. So he's got everything to lose if he doesn't toe the line. If he goes against the narrative, he gets the chop. So when it comes to particularly that desperate attempt to show, look, nothing is wrong, look, putting emphasis on my white minister, I think it was very blatant that it's a desperate attempt to try and show that, look, there's no bad treatments of white people in my country. I've got a white minister right here, not really clarifying the fact that he is part of your government. Of course, he's going to toe the government line. He is an employee of it.
What do you make of that moment in the Oval Office yesterday? Did you think it was a significant moment for South Africans? Were you, hopeful in a way because the American president had finally taken up your cause?
Well, I think, firstly, for the ANC and for the South African government, the meeting was a total disaster, the catastrophic way in which it unfolded. I think it was a really historic event for many reasons. For the one reason, firstly, that it put the very real and serious issue of farm murders on the global map to a degree that I don't think has happened in the past by any other party or leader or organization. And then also it confronted for the first time the South African government with the bitter fruits of its own policies and its own rhetoric and its own radicalism. And at the end of the day, when the South African government and particularly the ANC were tested on it for the first time in a long time on a global stage, they folded. They didn't have an answer. Their only real response was, don't believe your lying eyes and ears. Don't look at the screen. It's not real. That was the summation of their response. And I think it's been woefully inadequate for most people that would have given them a chance if they had some coherent response as to what was an explanation for what was being shown on the screen. But they just doubled down on the denial. This is not happening. I've never seen this before. Where is this from? I think the most telling moment was exactly that, when President Donald Trump showed that video of one of the largest farm murder protests in South Africa's history that happened in 2020, the video of all the crosses next to the road to protest farm murders. He showed that video to the president of South Africa, and then the president asks, where is this from? And then Donald Trump embarrassingly has to tell the president of South Africa, this is from your country. And it happened under his watch. It happened in 2020. At this protest, there was a massive banner addressing President Ramaphosa, asking how many more murders is he going to tolerate, farm murders in particular. So no, it went very badly for the ANC and for the South African delegation. But for South Africa, it went very well because the government and its inadequacies and its lies were exposed for the first time in a long time to a very large audience, a global audience, and they were not impressed with what they saw.
Well, that's certainly how it was reported in the liberal press in the US, was that Trump was offering false claims of white genocide or anti-white discrimination in South Africa. So let's broaden it out from the meeting yesterday. Let's take it back, sort of give people a bit of historical context. And that's another phrase that I found utterly bizarre. And if you saw the CNN clip of the news anchors trying to explain the so-called historical context to the videos of people shouting, "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer." So after apartheid falls in the 1990s, can you take us back to that moment and how South African race relations have developed in the last 30 years?
So in the past 30 years since the end of apartheid, we've seen a chronic state decay, a government that is more obsessed with ideological purity than it is with producing results that actually makes people's lives better. So the ANC are not moderates by any stretch of the imagination. They're very clearly deeply rooted in their far leftist ideology. And this is not even something that you have to speculate on. You only have to look as far as their very cozy alliance with the South African Communist Party, the fact that they praise leaders like Robert Mugabe as a hero, that they praise Mao Zedong as a hero, that they praise Fidel Castro as a hero, they praise Hugo Chavez of Venezuela as a hero. The list goes on and on. This is not a moderate party, and their vicious dedication to their destructive ideology has destroyed many parts of South Africa in all aspects. In regards to crime is out of control. In regards to infrastructure is falling apart. In regards to electricity, South Africa has been in an electricity crisis of rolling blackouts for 18 years. It started in 2007. I remember being a young boy on my way to school and hearing on the radio that we were going to experience rolling blackouts this evening. Well, it's now 2025. I'm now married with a mortgage, and I still experience rolling blackouts on a regular basis. So it's a government that is just completely incapable of solving the problems that it faces because of firstly, its corruption, its incompetence, and its ideological radicalness. It's a genuinely extremist party, the ANC, if you look at the policies that they push. Anti-private property rights policies, racially discriminatory policies, anti-free market policies, just all these types of policies that lead to ruin. I mean, and they just keep radicalizing even more. They just passed an act in South Africa this year, the Expropriation Act. That is a serious threat to private property rights. It's one of the acts that Donald Trump referenced in this meeting and has been referencing now for the past few months. It is a genuine attack against private property in this country because it gives the government the power to expropriate any property that it wants without compensation. And then also there's the racially discriminatory laws, another very big bone to pick that Trump has with the South African government is the over 140 documented race laws that the government still has on the books and the laws that it uses to actively discriminate against minority communities, particularly the white minority in South Africa.
So when it comes to some of these policies, the ANC would defend them as saying, look, this is about equality. This is about reversing the oppression under apartheid. This is about trying to lift up the black population where the white minority had ruled for so many years and gathered so much wealth and farmland and so on. So they passed this act, as you said, where they could basically steal people's land if it was in the so-called public interest. What do you make of this argument that, look, this is all about equalization, about trying to reverse apartheid, about trying to give blacks more of a kind of economic aid?
So there's two sides to that response. On the one side, well, firstly is the principle of you don't fix human rights violations in the past with human rights violations in the present. You can't condemn apartheid's racially discriminatory hiring practices as some of the worst human rights violations of the previous century and then just copy and paste the same racially discriminatory hiring practices again in the 21st century and then pretend like you're fixing a problem. This time, in their words, it's positive discrimination. No, it's just racist discrimination by the government, and there's no other way of looking at it. Then the other side is, well, maybe it has uplifted some people. No, it hasn't actually. All it's done is created a new class of political elites. The black economic empowerment policies, as they're called, have nothing to do with black economic empowerment. They have everything to do with just giving jobs and opportunities to those with the right political connections. So it's the smokescreen that's really the most insidious part of it all, is that even though they are wrong in principle, racial discrimination by the government is wrong in principle, they haven't even produced any positive results. All it has created is this crony class of people that are uplifted from being middle class to filthy rich, or from filthy rich to even more, even richer. That's the real sad irony of it, is that there isn't even a little bit of sugar to go with the bitterness. It's all just bitter. It's all really just a bad outcomes and bad principles. So no, it hasn't even uplifted anyone when it comes to the racially discriminatory laws. It's just cynically used to reward party loyalists and those with the right political connections, and exclude people for having the wrong skin color.
I want to ask about this phrase white genocide. Now, genocide invokes Rwanda, what happened in the Second World War, the Holocaust. This is the mass murder of vast numbers of people because of an inherent characteristic they hold. Does this apply to South Africa in any way?
So I represent AfriForum, and AfriForum is one of the organizations that has done some of the most groundbreaking and detailed work in regards to documenting the scourge of farm murders and fighting farm murders in South Africa. We as an organization do not refer to farm murders, which is a very serious issue, as a white genocide, but it raises two very important questions. The first question that it raises is, does an issue only become important when it is at the level of genocide? Will farm murders only be really worth anyone's time and interest and care and sympathy when it is at genocide levels? That's the first uncomfortable question that it raises. And the second uncomfortable question is the fact that when you have many people on the outside of South Africa looking in at the brutality of farm murders, the torture associated with farm murders, the politicians encouraging and inciting farm murders, and to them they see genocide. What does that say about those people inside South Africa that then respond by saying it's just normal crime? There's nothing strange about it. South Africa is just a violent place. That's all there is to it. It's a real indictment of those types of denialists, because farm murders are not normal crime. It's the only violent crime phenomenon that is actively encouraged by high profile politicians. It's the only violent crime phenomenon in South Africa that is actively and blatantly denied even exists by the South African president, who in 2018 went to New York, and when asked by a journalist, told the journalist there are no murdering of farmers in South Africa, his words. And it's the only violent crime phenomenon where there's not a justified response from the government. So the government has many crimes that it categorizes as priority crimes, like, for example, gender-based violence, rhino poaching, cash in transit heists, political assassinations, gang violence. These are all priority crimes, which is a category of crime as defined by the Police Act, which means that they get a special response because they're a unique type of crime. Farm murders, for some reason, the South African government just outright refuses to add to this category. AfriForum has made the argument crystal clear why it should be added to this category. It's a unique crime that deserves a unique counter strategy. But the South African government just outright says, no, we are not going to put it in that category, and we won't explain why. It's just, it boggles the mind. So it's not normal crime. It's a crime that needs, at the very least, normal attention. It's not even getting a normal attention at the moment in South Africa. It's just openly denied. And I think that says a lot about those people that deny it.
Okay, so let's put the counter case again from sort of CNN. They claim these clips that you see online of people chanting "kill the Boer, kill the farmer." That comes from anti-apartheid political movements. They don't mean it literally, it's metaphorical. The South African president yesterday was saying that the main political leader who's been popularizing this song again, he is a radical who has nothing to do with the South African government, despite the fact there's lots of images of the two shaking hands and looking very friendly, but we'll put that to one side. So, first of all, this chant that you mentioned, the one that politicians are encouraging, is just metaphorical, it's just a political chant. And then, second of all, the other point that you kind of made was that, look, South Africa is a very dangerous place. There's a lot of murders. white farmers aren't necessarily being targeted in this way, and some of the farmers who are being killed are also black, so this isn't anti-white discrimination. Go ahead.
Well, the majority of the farmers that are being murdered are white, and whites are a tiny minority within South Africa. So there's your first clue on why it's not normal. And then secondly, I mean, if you substitute farmers with any other profession, suddenly it doesn't really sound like a metaphor at all anymore. Kill the journalist, kill the politician, kill the doctor, kill whatever. You can put any profession into that that chant, and then it suddenly becomes very uncomfortable. And people are like, oh, I wouldn't want to be seen in public chanting that. But for some reason, kill the farmer, kill the Boer is acceptable. For some reason that you're allowed. It's open season on that particular demographic. Boer also having an ethnic connotation to Afrikaners. When it also comes to the metaphor argument, it doesn't hold water. I mean, we've had instances of farm murders where that chant has been chanted while the farm murder or farm attack is happening. And then there's also many instances involving where farm murders involve brutal torture. I mean, 80-year-old women being tortured to death, small children being drowned in bathtubs of boiling water, often murders happening and nothing being stolen from the farm. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that this is just normal crime. This is just part and parcel of living in a violent society. That you'd have to be psychotic to really believe that torturing an 86-year-old woman to death with a power drill is normal crime. It's not.
Can you give us a bit of historical context as to when these murders started happening, why they're occurring, who is committing these crimes?
Well, there's always been farm murders in South Africa to varying degrees of severity, but it really started picking up in the 1980s and in the 1980s when the ANC actively encouraged attacks on farmers and farms to terrorize the farming community, and you could find that in their documentation. They literally incited it. And kill the Boer, kill the farmer is intimately connected to that incitement to kill farmers by the ANC and its military wing and those associated with it. So in the 1990s as well, that trend continued. There was a strong, in the 1990s, still a very high level of farm murders. There still is a very high level today, but in the 90s it was particularly high, and it has remained high ever since. Communities have gotten better in fighting back and getting more organized, but the problem persists, and the government keeps denying it, and the government just keeps averting its eyes, saying, don't look at the problem, ignore the problem, it's not a big deal. It really gets to a point where you have to start asking serious questions of the moral caliber of those denying the issue.
Have you experienced racial discrimination yourself? Have you seen violence? I presume you've seen violence in South Africa. It's a very violent country. Can you tell us a bit about your own experiences in the country?
Yes, I've been a victim of violent crime. I've luckily not been a victim of a farm attack. I grew up in a farming community, so I know many people that have been victims of farm attacks. Loved ones of mine were victims of a farm attack where they were attacked on their farm. Luckily, no one was murdered, but a farm attack nonetheless that was averted. When it comes to particularly the story of Afrikaners and the Afrikaner connection to farming, that's a very intimate connection. If you're an Afrikaner, you either live on a farm, and if you're not a farmer yourself, you have family that farm, and if you don't have family that farm, you have friends that farm. So you're intimately connected to farming. That's why another synonym for Afrikaners is the Boers, literally the farmers. That's what it means. So when it comes to particularly my personal experience, I've been affected. I've been affected through my loved ones being targets of a farm attack, and knowing many people coming from a farming community that have been victims of farm attacks.
And what are the chances that you or your friends or your family would actually take up the offer of refugee status in the States? Because Trump recently announced this program to allow for some Afrikaners to come to the US. I think it was like 57 or 59, maybe you can correct me on the number, but so quite small numbers at the moment. But do you think that there could be more people applying for this?
Well, there certainly will be more people applying and definitely more people going, but we'll see how that unfolds. I personally will not be taking the offer, and there's a lot of nuance to that. The fact that, as the old Moroccan saying goes, my country is my country even when I'm treated unfairly there. My family has been in South Africa since 1688. I'm the ninth generation of my family here. And that's the story for most Afrikaners. We're all 9, 10, 11th generation of our families here. You're tied to South Africa in a way that's indescribable. This place is your home. It's the only place where your culture is indigenous to. It's the only place where our language of Afrikaans is indigenous to. So yes, there will have been many people that have left. There will be more people that leave, but there will be many also that stay. The majority of Afrikaners will stay. The majority of Afrikaners will still be here next year and the year after that. And that will be for many reasons, some for material reasons, but many for non-material reasons, like being genuinely tied to a place, tied to the land, even when you are treated horrifically there. It's something that you can't really put a price on, can't really put a value to it. It's sometimes even difficult to explain, but the best way to explain it is really that the red dust here in Southern Africa really gets into your bones, gets into your blood.
There was a clip again on one of the liberal TV networks in the States where one of the commentators was arguing that white South Africans are colonizers, they've only been in South Africa for a few hundred years, and therefore they still have no right to live there, and they should actually go back to the European nations that they originated from all of those years ago. What did you make of that argument?
Let's take me as an example. My ancestors are Dutch, French, German, Flemish, Swedish, and Scottish. Where do I go back to? Sounds like a riddle.
For a bad joke.
Yeah, there's that. To make those types of comments of just go back to your home country in Europe is one of the most ignorant comments anyone can make about Afrikaners. It just shows they have no idea about their history. They haven't even touched a shred of Afrikaner or of African history for that matter. It really is just despicable what some people are, what the depths they will stoop to indulge in anti-Afrikaner rhetoric. Afrikaners as a culture originated in Southern Africa, and there aren't any other country, isn't any other country where the culture is indigenous to. There's no other country where our language is indigenous to. And when Afrikaners think of home, they think of South Africa. We're not like the descendants of people from the colonial powers that lived in previously colonial states that could flee or move, quote unquote, home to wherever the headquarters in Lisbon or London or Amsterdam ordered them to come back to, because there is no home for Afrikaners to go back to. We are not the descendants of a single nation. We are the descendants of many different Western nations, which means that that is like a riddle to, as I said earlier, if you look at my background, where do I return to? Well, I can only go home, and home is here in Southern Africa, where my family has been longer than the United States has been a country.
Now, Elon Musk is South African, but he's not Afrikaner. He comes from a British South African background. Now, this is GB News, so I'm kind of curious about how, first of all, how the British South Africans are holding up. Are they also being targeted, or are they kind of okay? And what is the, yeah, well, answer that one first, and I'll ask the next one, yeah.
Well, all white South Africans are being discriminated against. The racially discriminatory laws of the ANC and the South African government do not make exception for any white group in South Africa. Everyone, regardless of their culture within the white minority, are the target of these laws. And then secondly, yes, there are Anglo or English descendant white farmers being murdered as well. That's a fact in South Africa. So I don't want to create the impression that it's only the Afrikaners that are being singled out. Often in political rhetoric, there's more of a heavy focus on the Afrikaners than the British white South Africans, but they suffer under the race laws just the same.
And just finally, what is the Afrikaner view of the British Empire? Are they still mad about the Boer War? I'm not being very politically correct here, so forgive me.
It's an interesting topic.
Yeah, so what do you think of the British Empire? What do you think of, Cecil Rhodes? What do you think of Jameson? What do you think of all these people?
Well, in the past, I think in the previous century, there was a lot more animosity between Afrikaners and white English South Africans. But in the 21st century, that has pretty much been left in history. There might still be some nasty jokes and sometimes a little bit of prejudice both ways, but not nearly to the extent that we saw in the previous century. The English white South Africans and Afrikaners relations in 2025 in South Africa are actually quite good. They're very good. So my personal views, I mean, I'm not I'm not a fan of the British Empire. I'm going to side with my own people in the Anglo-Boer War. We're allowed to be on our own side. But at the same time, I'm not going to be holding the descendants of the British in 2025 accountable for what happened in the Anglo-Boer War. Then I'm nothing better than these pathetic politicians in the ANC and all of these politicians that push this generational guilt narrative. It's just the breeding ground for an inferiority complex, and I don't want that.
Very well said. And I think as a Brit, I can say, obviously, I support my own side as well, but we
You're
made
allowed to.
mistakes. We
Yeah.
made mistakes in that war. And I think it was a shame that war had to happen, the reason it happened was just disastrous. I don't know why
Right.
Jameson
But I'm
decided to
not
do
going to
that.
be demanding reparations from you. I'm not going to be demanding an apology. I'm not going to be demanding that you pay me or give me anything because, like I said, that's not a strong foundation for healthy self-respect. Then your happiness becomes dependent on the actions of others, and that, like I said, that breeds an inferiority complex. That breeds someone that can't really look towards the future because they're just stuck on this one niggle from the past, this one thing that keeps hammering them, pushing them to guilt others based on their collective identity. It just I don't want to wish that existence on anyone.